Good morning. I'm Helen Bonser-Wilton. I'm the Chief Executive at Leeds Castle, which is not, as you might think, in Yorkshire, but actually in Kent. And we do get quite a lot of people who are booked for the accommodation who actually phone us from Leeds saying, we can't find your castle. Bit of a problem. So I'm going to talk to you today about how we're on a journey towards creating exceptional visitor experiences. We're definitely not there yet, but what I want to talk to you about is the journey we've undergone and the things that actually underpin it. And while Leeds Castle is a very big visitor attraction, the principles that I'm going to talk about apply to the smallest and the biggest of any attraction that you might be working with. So I hope the precepts will be useful. So I've been at Leeds Castle now for just over 2 years. Leeds is a really interesting place, actually. It's a very, very successful commercial attraction. Whenever I've gone into a heritage job, and I've done quite a few over my 20 years in heritage, I've had to install commerciality into the organisation. With Leeds, I did not need to install commerciality. What we need to do is install heritage. So, a slightly different precept. But I'm going to just start by just telling you what there is at Leeds Castle. So, quick rundown. It's a 903-year-old estate with nearly 1,000 acres. We're an independent charity and we're nearly 50 years old. We've got a moated castle, which you can see there on the right, and the oldest part on the right-hand side of the photo was started in 1278. There have been developments of the castle during Tudor times, and the current main bit of the castle is actually only 200 years old. But it looks like a medieval castle, so people think they're coming to a medieval experience, and they're really not. We've got 4 gardens. 2 of them were designed by the leading 20th century architect Russell Page. We have an artificial lake, a maze, 3 adventure playgrounds, a Go Ape course, a Segway provider, a wildlife garden, a birds of prey centre with over 30 birds, a boat, a train, 3 shops, 7 catering areas, 40 B&B rooms, 6 holiday cottages, 8 glamping tents, a golf course, an adventure golf course, a cricket club, and a lot of ducks. If anybody follows me on Twitter or LinkedIn, you'll have seen my duck posts. So there's a lot going on. It's a very diverse place. So in terms of the business makeup, we have about 160 staff. We used to have 260 pre-COVID, so we had to take out 40% of staff, and we have not been able to afford to rebuild that. We have 80 volunteers, about 7,000 school visits a year, used to be about 12,000. The great majority are Kent-based. Our income's split about 63% day visitors and 37% hospitality. And at the moment, we're running at between about 400 to 425,000 visits a year, and it used to be about 550,000. So I think one of the challenges for all of us at the moment is we've gone past the stage now of saying when we snap back to pre-COVID business, it isn't coming. You need to come up with a different business model. It's all about the yield, quite honestly. So, when I arrived at Leeds, what did I find? Well, I found a fantastically commercial organisation, which those of you working in heritage will know is quite rare. But I also found an organisation that was telling a story that was really very confused. So when I went round and said, what is Leeds Castle? Everybody gave me a different answer. And the answer was what I'm personally interested in, quite honestly. So there was quite a lot of silo. People are in their trench in terms of what we were. So I thought it was going to be a really important start point to just get some independent views and start to craft what is known as a spirit of place. Now, most of you will know this, some of you may not, but spirit of place is basically a process whereby you gather absolute facts about why you're significant, but you also draw in audience feedback. So it might be from your TripAdvisor, it might be from your school groups, it might be from your staff and volunteers, all of which we did. And that actually helps you understand why you're genuinely significant. And for me, that gives you your unique selling point, and that's what your whole business strategy should be based on. So this is as applicable to a place that gets 20,000 visitors as it is to one that gets 2 million. And what that told us was something quite interesting. So essentially, Leeds is a very unusual type of castle. So we brought in the leading castles expert in the country who works for English Heritage, a guy called Jeremy Ashby. And he talked about the fact that there are 5 types of castle. There's the one you would expect, the military castles where they're pouring boiling oil on people's heads, shooting arrows out of the arrow slits. That is not Leeds. However, we were presenting Leeds with lots of armour, lots of weapons, none of which was relevant whatsoever. The next one is coastal fortresses, places like Dover Castle, and they're there to blast the boats out the water before they land. Obviously also not Leeds. The next category is tax collecting places, governance places, so places like Nottingham Castle, for example. And the next one is like seats of an aristocratic family, so somewhere like Hever Castle, where the Boleyn family lived, for example. Also not Leeds. So Leeds is in a category with probably only one other castle in the country, which is Kenilworth. And we are basically a giant party house. So throughout history, throughout 900 years, we have not been about defending and military. We've been about hosting people for fantastic hospitality. And so people come here to rest and relax en route to somewhere else. And that is quite a unique positioning. So for me, that immediately made me go, do you know what? This is what our whole business plan should absolutely reek of. So Leeds is also unusual because she's a female castle. It has been all about the design. It's been about the female owners. So we have 6 medieval queens as owners at a time when medieval women couldn't own property. So that's really unusual. And our last owner, Lady Olive Bailey, was basically a billionaireess in current terms. And she behaved as a result in a way that women could not behave at that time. So she basically chomped through 3 husbands and multiple lovers and just tossed them all aside because she just had money and she could do it. So how fabulous is that for a story? It's the classic sex, drugs, champagne and rock and roll. What's not to like on that one? So clearly we are leaning into this very heavily. And the 20th century social history that happened at Leeds is also very significant. So Lady Bailey hosted the rich, the famous film stars like Charlie Chaplin, leading politicians of the time, and people like Edward and Wallace. I mean, it was really the jet set, and they actually came to Leeds for Country House weekends. So you have a really compelling, unique story there. So what we then did is to say, okay, so if that underpins our business plan, what does that mean for retail, for accommodation, for our story in the castle, for the way we do things? You know, what does that mean? And that's what we've rolled out. So I'll just give you an explanation of what we've done to date. So this is 2 years on, so we've been going at speed. Because another thing with Leeds is it was very good at planning out these £8 million giant projects, but unsurprisingly, nobody ever had the money to do them. My view is you get on, you do stuff, you improve, you learn, you change, you do it bit by bit. And with the help of our fantastic head curator who's sat in the audience here, Sue, wave your hand, Sue. So if anybody wants to talk to Sue about how to deliver a fantastic visitor experience in 6 months, which is what she did, she's worth talking to. Don't poach her. So in terms of what we've done, so it's all about the look and feel of what you're doing. And again, we've done this at our level. This could be done at any level. So at the bottom, we had a visitor centre that was, quite frankly, my dad worked in social work in the 1970s. When I went into our visitor centre, it looked like his social work centre in the 1970s. So sticky carpets, really nasty. So we couldn't change the building, we didn't have the money, so we stripped it all out, knocked out a wall, and created that you can see that thing at the bottom, a completely open plan space with some nice flooring, and really started telling the story from the get-go. So the minute you come into there, you know you're going into a 1930s experience. And there's quotes from people, and it has all of our new branding, which I'll talk about in a moment. The other thing is, because our story really wasn't clear, our retail proposition was definitely not clear. And it was, I mean, I can only describe it as chaotic, if I'm honest with you. We just bought a bit of everything, and everyone likes Henry VIII, so let's go for that, even though Henry VIII owned the castle. He may never have visited, we don't know. So we completely revamped our retail ranges, changed 95% of them. So it literally was starting from scratch. And it was all about telling the stories that were emanating from our spirit of place. So what you get is that product that really you can only get at Leeds. And that's the win here. You don't need people going onto Amazon and saying, oh, I can get that £5 cheaper. So it's all about that, telling the story throughout. We also had an accommodation reception. The actual, so as I mentioned, we've got 40 B&B rooms, glamping tents, holiday cottages, etc. So this is a big business for us. And the actual office was quite nice, but it was actually facing onto the area where the bins were collected. So it wasn't really the luxury experience you want to give. So we moved it round to the front of the building, and again, just did an internal revamp. And what you can see on the left is the bathroom that goes with the accommodation reception. This sounds minor, but it really isn't. So our last owner had llamas and zebras and flamingos. It was all about the exoticism. So we've put up peacock and zebra wallpaper in that arrival. But on the right, you can see our accommodation reception, and it's all 1930s furniture, it's the wallpapers, everything. And it just gets people into that mode the minute they arrive, and they absolutely love it. And that didn't cost very much at all, actually. So you can do this with a bit of imagination, really cleaving to your spirit of place. Obviously, you can't change things and not change your visual identity. So what we had was a brand that had been introduced in 2014, and it was a perfectly competent brand. But I have to say, when I looked at it, it spoke to me of being masculine, very 1980s estate, very corporate. And actually, our brand is something very different. So we did a branding exercise on the back of Spirit of Place, and that took us through to a proposition of playing hostess to history. So when history's happening, we're basically providing the hospitality around it. And that takes you in a much more of a female direction. It's very much hostess to history, not host, you'll notice, because the castle is female. So it was very much about florals, it's about a very feminine feel, and very emotive. I wanted it to feel emotive and all of the imagery to be about people stuff. It feels modern. We've also completely rebuilt our website, because when I arrived, I said, look, what we need is videos for the summer, showing the experience. It turned out our website couldn't run videos, which is good in 2021, isn't it? So we had to completely rebuild that, and that was a good investment. But that was also reskinned with the new brand. And every time we focus on a different era of history, we create a new creative campaign, but it has the same elements that you see throughout. We've also rolled it out to signage, which you can see on the bottom right. So the minute you enter the estate, you get this look and feel that we're trying to create. The other thing that we didn't have when I arrived was audience segmentation. When I asked who our audiences was, I was basically told old people and families, which is not the best segmentation, perhaps, that you could use. So we did a customized version of the culture segments from Maurice Hargreaves McIntyre, really worth doing to help your teams understand what we're talking about. We're also known at Leeds for our events, and these were really large scale throughout the last 15, 20 years. But to an extent, it's got bigger and bigger and bigger, and nobody was really keeping an eye on the actual profitability and the amount of internal resource it was taking. So COVID, although we would not have wanted it, has provided quite a good opportunity to break that and re-establish on new terms. And remember, we've now got 40% less staff, so we obviously can't deliver the same thing. So what we decided to do was to retain the ones that really work for us. So things like the summer concert, the fireworks, which generates about $250,000 of profit for us every year, and it's got huge community love. And then we introduced new events that really played into that spirit of place. So every September now, we have a festival of design, and we have a sculpture trail. We're heading for year 3 of the sculpture trail. So that fits very much with our design credentials, and we're developing that year and year to do everything from quilting to art installations, etc. So that is becoming a dedicated event in its own right. We also looked at new things like Christmas. So we used to do Christmas in the castle, and we used to do Christmas markets. And that got a huge number of people coming. It also lost money by the time you realised that the whole organisation worked on it throughout the whole of December, and our neighbours all hated us because we blocked up the roads for all the weekends in November and December. And we just couldn't do it with the reduced staff. So what we went for, rather belatedly, was a Christmas lights trail with Raymond Gubbay, which I think will work really well for us. And we pushed them really hard to say, don't just bring us your random light installations, you need to tell our story. And they're really good at that, actually. So this year we'll have swimming lit swans going around the lake and things like that. So it should be very much something you can only see at Leeds Castle. And we've also introduced something else this year, which is all about entertaining, which is what we're doing. We've just introduced a pop-up beach, which we built during April, and that's going down an absolute storm, it has to be said. Not least with my staff, who seem to be sitting out there with a beer most night. So in terms of what we've done in the castle was incredibly confusing. So it was jumping from era to era. So the oldest part of the castle, which I talked about, it was being presented as a false medieval castle. There's nothing in that castle that's older than 1926. It's been built in medieval style, but it's not a medieval place. So you can't present fake interiors like that. So Sue and I had enormous fun getting those ripped out last February, March. And what we've done is we've taken the castle back to the 1930s house party. So you arrive and you sort of follow the guests around and you see the glasses knocked over and crumbs on the table and people's underwear discarded in different directions. I love that one. And we're just building on that all the time. And it's all about the partying. So we have shadow dancing on the wall in the salon. It's becoming great fun. So we did the basics last year, and we're moving on this year to actually add additional things. What we also did is a second phase. So in the actual castle, which is only from 1822, most of it, where we turned it back to the 1930s house party, of course, a lot of our audiences want to see the medieval experience as well. So we took that back to the gatehouse, which is on the entry to the castle, because that does have medieval fabric. And because we don't have objects, we don't really have physical fabric to present, what we actually did was a cinematic projected experience where our 6 medieval queens, narrated by Catherine of Aragon, the first wife of Henry VIII, actually hop out of their portraits and tell you their stories. And what we're trying to do is not tell the obvious stories. We're trying to dig a bit further and say, well, you know, their stories are always seen through the prism of their husbands. And actually, that's not right, is it? And these are really interesting women. So that's gone down well as well. So the final thing I was going to touch on, I think, was what we are doing this year. So this year, in April, we've just introduced a fantastic UV torch trail for the children in the castle. So Lady Bailey had 2 giant Great Danes in the castle. And if you see the old footage of it, you can actually see it, the footage at the picnic. Everyone's talking, and the Great Danes are basically sweeping all the picnic off the table. So these were very much involved in castle life. So what we've actually done is come up with UV bones, and they're scattered around the castle where they've hidden them, and you take your UV light around and find them. It's gone down fantastically well, and it's something that was really quite cheap, and we're going to actually adapt, for example, for Halloween to have spooky things to do. So it's been a genius thing that Sue came up with, I have to say. Our only issue is that people are nicking the bones. No idea why, but they are. And the final thing, which leads into Edward's, is that we really felt we needed a multimedia guide. We used to have an audio guide pre-COVID, but it was very dry, if I can put it that way. And this one that we've now introduced really starts telling the story. So when you're standing in the 1930s room, we can actually zoom out and say, of course, in medieval times this happened, Eleanor of Castile did this, without being inauthentic. So that is going down really well. It's in 8 languages, and we have an ambition to create a 1930s specific one at a later date. But we've worked with Orpheo, who have basically, we got the script written, and they did everything else in terms of translations, recording, and so on. So I'm going to hand on to Edward. Happy to take any questions afterwards if we run out of time.
Can I be on the... Hello. Sorry, I think this might be my first time on a Brittany mic, so I hope you can hear me. I'm Edward. I'm the Managing Director of Orpheo UK. Many of you in this room may already know us. Some of you may not. We are an audio guide experience company. So we have 30 years in the business, and we range a wide range of different skills that we can come and bring to a site. We've been so fortunate to work with Leeds Castle because Leeds and our company share a really strong bond, and I think that is storytelling. And storytelling and bringing the experience for the visitor alive. It's a very hard company to discuss what we actually do because we do such a wide range of services. So we are a manufacturer of audio guides and equipment, right through to content production. We do mobile systems, software for for museums or historic sites, audio-visual integration. You may not have heard of Orpheo, but you probably have used an Orpheo product in some capacity. As I said, we've been in business for 30 years and we're in 13 offices around the world and in 57 nations. So a big brand legacy, and as you can see, some of our clients that we work with, very broad. And one thing I always notice with clients that come to us, especially on trade stands like this, oh, you're too big a company to work with. That's not true. We will do a small country house in Ireland with 5 audio guides or a service required, right up to, I think, the biggest tourist site on earth, which is Versailles, or the Salt Cathedral in Colombia, which is another ginormous site that we do. So over and again about what our company does. Our achievements, we have worked on most large sites around the world in some sort of capacity. I might just stand here. I think there's getting a bit of a lead. Can I go to this? Sorry, I think I was getting a bit of interference with the other microphone. So projects we might work with, we were at the Mary Rose Museum, the Bodleian Library, the Vatican is a new site this year, which is fantastic. It has been a real stress. We were given about 3 weeks' notice to deliver thousands of devices to there, as well as Versailles, Trinity College, the White House. Looking at your site and looking at your visitor interpretation, there's lots of different approaches. The whole point is to come onto site, work out what is your brand, what is your storytelling. So we do this in a variety of different ways. Some sites have very big turnovers of visitors. Some sites require lull times. So sometimes we're employed just to keep visitors moving, and we see this in big sites that have mass busloads come through. It's all about bums on seats getting visitors through. Some sites are smaller museums that have great resources of content that cannot be discovered in other ways. So our business comes in and we look at the content you have. We may create content for you and we work out what is the best visitor approach for you. In our mobile applications, and I would invite anyone to come and see us on stand, this sort of technology is becoming increasingly popular for sites, and the technology we can deliver here is, if not the same as the hardware, the levels of experience that we can give augmented reality, we can give castle reconstructions, we can bring pictures to life like Harry Potter, and all this technology is getting greater and greater. One thing I often find when visiting sites is the question of, is there a place for hardware in the future? We've just put in hardware at Leeds Castle as well as a visitor application. And I find it very interesting meeting different clients throughout the country and also internationally and hearing their stories. Hardware, I believe, has a huge role to play still in the future. And one thing we don't do very good in heritage in the UK is think about international visitors. A lot of major sites in the UK and smaller sites, that may be a budget thing, don't cater to our international guests. Our company is international, so we have the fortune of being able to see across the world visitor trends. The visitor that is told, welcome to my site, that isn't offered hardware is expected to use their mobile telephone. How many of you today are using a telephone for banking? How many of you today are using a telephone to get around? Google Maps. Imagine if you couldn't answer your phone to talk to your child to say how to get into the house this afternoon. We all rely on our telephone, and that is why hardware breaks that. Hardware allows visitors to have a break from their own telephones and immerse themselves into the experience that they're having. A big trend at the moment we're seeing in sites is eyes up interpretation, and this is something we've really pushed with Leeds. We want visitors to have a break from their mobile phone. We want visitors to have an experience that's unique. Anyone can sit at home and play Scrabble on their telephone or Sudoku. We want visitors to have a really sense of place, and being a sense of place, they have to have their eyes up. They can be guided and they can have extra elements, but fundamentally they have come to see the site. So we did this at Leeds with automatic triggering. I welcome all of you to go visit Leeds. It's a fantastic system. They have our new Orpheo Hybe, which is a multimedia guide that came out only in November, so it's absolutely cutting edge. The visitor seamlessly walks throughout the castle and they're triggered. This is very important also in Leeds, which has some smaller areas to walk through that requires some crowd management. And we've been rolling this out in stage 1, and perhaps in stage 2 we'll look at this some more. It's very interesting how visitors behave when they have this sort of technology. But we want visitors to experience it. And we want them to experience it in 9 different languages. And in the future, sign language. Accessibility is a huge area and something we can all improve in the heritage sector. By putting in a decent system of a multimedia guide, you're then able to make your site much more open to visitors that have special needs. We're able to go into a site that has an area that has restricted access, so stairwells, areas that visitors, older visitors, people who don't have mobility are able to have the same experience because of the technology. So I always come onto site and place and we say, what works for you? The whole building of an experience has to be looking at your failures, because you already have great sites, you have amazing things and amazing stories to tell, but we need to work out how we can make them better and how we can work to open it up to more visitors. This is an growing area, immersive shows, and something we're always trying to make heritage more accessible and exciting. COVID was a reset, as you were saying, for many of us. Orpheo was hardly a business in COVID because all of a sudden the world shut down. So what did we do in that time? We invested in research and design. We've spent about 500 million for the last 4 years on our products, and I hope if you come and visit our products on B1, you will be impressed by our technologies and the services we do. But we also brought the museums outside. And so this is a big area of growth. These immersive shows, you would have seen these Lumiere shows of making art come alive and being immersed in it. It's not about being in moldy old environments. The visitors of Instagram, of TikTok, of Facebook, of the younger generations are wanting more and more experience. Unfortunately, it is the generation of Instagram, and a lot of your own marketing is self-marketing by your visitors. So how do we make our immersive shows not your run-of-the-mill sort of Christmas show? We have incorporated our existing technology of audio guides and triggering systems to make a seamless experience where you can walk through heritage and hear a story, to hear the narrative, to bring those voices of your sense of place alive. So we can put the lights to trigger with the device. We can make the device become part of the light show, depending on which device you're using. But we want the visitors to think, God, that was amazing. I want to come back when it's open. And that's what this is all about. We want to tease, we want to titillate, we want to excite. And we want your visitors to think, I'm going to bring my mother there. I'm going to bring my children there. I'm going to bring my lover there. We want you all to have these open sites that people want to visit. That is why Orpheo can do it, because we offer the whole package. We do all the design, we do script writing. We will work with your existing scripts, but we will help make them better. We have had 30 years in this industry of making tours throughout the world, and we move towards more video production, more 3D, augmented reality. These are the buzzwords of the future. And for sites to stay relevant to future generations and to the TikTok world, incremental investment must be made towards these things. The standard conversation of we're a small site, we cannot afford it, is actually a block to thinking about the future. You can afford it. There are different ways of investment and there are staggered ways of getting there. We offer lease to buy, we offer a shared revenue, we offer ways into projects that you would never think would be possible. But if we do little steps, you can learn, you can grow, and you can stay relevant. Content. This is again about accessibility, and I can't express this as much. We won a couple of years ago the Museum Award for Accessibility, and we did a wonderful project where we brought Andy Warhol to life. We put Warhol art as the BSL. And if you come to our stand, we'd love to show you how we can make the accessibility part of the general tour and make it at the forefront. There's no reason why accessibility has to be something that's offered on the side. No, it should be there at the front. Everyone should feel welcome into your site. I will probably now lead to some questions because you'll be wanting to speak to Helen, who's far more interested into why we're all here today and the wonderful things they've been doing at Leeds.
Well done, I really like that. Does anyone have any questions? There's a big crowd. I know somebody has a question. Seriously?
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy.
Hey! Thank you. Are we on? Are we on? Yeah, hi. Helen, thank you very much for that. I'm really curious, between yourself and your wonderful curator, what was the feedback that you got from your loyal long-term visitors with regards to what seems to be like a massive overnight change?
Yeah. Can you hear me on this one? It's working, isn't it? I would say the word Marmite would come to mind. So some of the people, I mean, you need to understand that Leeds Castle has been presented the same way for 40 years. 40, not 40. So some long-term visitors were like, oh, you've taken Henry VIII out, I don't like it anymore. Which is fair, because we have no proof he was even there, quite honestly. So I would say it was quite Marmite to start off with, probably 50-50, love it and hate it. We did some evaluation in October with our visitors, some external evaluation, because our trustees were getting quite hoppy about the TripAdvisor reviews, and there were a number of really awful ones. And it was interesting because that came up 95% positive, but came up with a number of recommendations around having an interactive guide, that sort of thing. I think it's always going to divide because a lot of people love medieval and they want to see medieval. The challenge for us as a heritage place is you can't confect medieval if you haven't got it. Or rather you can, because we did, but it's not the right thing to do. I think things will settle down a lot this year. I think we went through the worst last year because I literally Sue arrived with me at the start of November in 2021, and I said, you've got 6 months to create an entirely new presentation of the castle. That is not a reasonable thing to ask anybody, but she delivered it. But there's a limit to what we could do in that time, actually, and we're really clear that we're building on it year on year. And I think you just have to be comfortable with that and accept that you're going to get some brickbats in the beginning, but you'll improve year on year. It's a different way of approaching, isn't it? Thanks.
Any further questions?
Thank you, Helen. It just sounds absolutely fantastic what you've been doing. Leeds is very lucky. As somebody who worked in the tourist office selling tickets to Leeds on the coach, I have to tell many people that Leeds Castle isn't actually in Leeds. It's such a massive overhaul that you did, so assume that somebody doesn't have the budget or the means to do that. I was particularly interested about your UV trail. Is that something that can be done independently, or does it have to be part of the whole overall package?
I think you could totally do it independently. I mean, we just bought the torches off Amazon. Yeah, we just bought the UV torches off Amazon, bought the batteries off Amazon, and off we went. It's not like £20. You know, it's probably a couple of £1,000, but it's something that you can just develop and use for different times. So if you're looking for a low-cost family program, I think it's genius, I have to say.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Hi, both of you, fantastic presentation, thank you. I'm Merrin Kidd from the Bishop's Palace in Wells in Somerset. We do have a medieval building with very little inside it because all the bishops that have come and gone since the 1200s have taken their stuff. What is your feeling on recreating medieval scenes inside? Is that inauthentic? Do you have any suggestions?
Good question, isn't it? I mean, I would personally be quite comfortable with doing recreations as long as you're saying that they're recreations and they look accurate. I think where I have a problem is where you don't have anything whatsoever and you're confecting something. I think with the Bishop's Palace, which I know quite well because I used to live in Frome, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, the other thing you could look at is actually projecting things. That's another option, and especially if you use some of those rooms for hospitality and you need that flexibility, that is a great way of doing it. But you can only tell the story you have, right?
Thank you. We know that the next generation for sure will invest in technology if that improves their experience. We see that every day. But we know museums have limited budgets. So what area of technology, from your experience, would you recommend a museum should consider first or highest priority in terms of its ability to generate higher ROI in the form of higher ticket prices and repeat customers?
Okay. I think the first thing to say is don't start with we need technology. You need to start with we need to tell our story and what resources do we have to be able to do that. Because if you have artifacts, that's a different conversation. If you don't have artifacts, that's where you might bring technology in. The reason we brought in technology to do our medieval queen story is that we don't have anything. I mean, literally nothing. So you have to go there. I mean, there's a lot. I will not be popular by saying I don't think VR is the way forward, actually. Those individual experiences, that's not what you want. You want the numbers. You want those mass experiences, don't you? So when the VR providers can actually provide something that will cater for 300 people rather than one, then I think you have potentially a goer. But I think augmented reality is really helpful. So just as you were saying at the Bishop's Palace, if you can look at something and then see exactly how it would have been in medieval times. So for me, I'd like to do, like this room in medieval times looked like this, we think. This is how it looked in the 1930s. But actually in the 1990s, when Tony Blair was negotiating the Northern Ireland Accords, this is how it looked. And I think if augmented reality can be made so that it's mass rather than niche, I think that's helpful. But I don't think we're there yet. But always start with your story and don't start with we must have tech. Your story and your audiences.
And in terms of storytelling, I would say investment in foreign language tours as a base is so fantastic. Because if you open your site up to foreign languages, you might find foreign donors. And I'm always shocked by major institutions that don't offer a foreign language tour, because you have people who are sitting around in cities or visiting that have no interaction with your site. They might love your site, they might want to donate a building, but you haven't let them love your site. So opening up your site to as many audiences as possible, I think is really a crucial first step.
And just the last one, QR codes are a really good way of doing it. I mean, virtually everybody has a mobile phone. If you have a QR code, it'll take you to a website, you can upload that yourself. It's an easy way of offering more content.
Okay, we're out of time, but they're at stand B1, so go and visit them. And you'll be around all day?
I might be.
She might be around all day, so feel free to ask more questions, but we're out of time for this one. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.